3 weeks ago, Rebecca Martinez woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by the constant beeping of machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Her body was broken. Doctors had diagnosed her with a fractured collarbone, 3 broken ribs, and a severe concussion that left them concerned about possible bleeding in her brain. Every breath sent a wave of pain through her chest, and even opening her eyes felt like a struggle. Yet, despite her injuries, Rebecca's first thought was not about herself. It was about her 6-week-old daughter, Emma. Just hours earlier, Rebecca had been driving to the grocery store, leaving Emma in the care of her elderly neighbor for what was supposed to be a quick 20-minute trip. Then disaster struck. A delivery truck barreled through a red light at nearly 60 miles per hour and slammed directly into the driver's side of her car. The deafening sound of twisting metal filled the air as the impact sent her vehicle spinning uncontrollably across multiple lanes of traffic. The airbags exploded. Glass shattered, and within seconds, everything went black. When Rebecca briefly regained consciousness in the ambulance, panic immediately consumed her. Through the oxygen mask, she desperately tried to explain that her newborn daughter was waiting at home. Emma was exclusively breastfed and had never taken a bottle. Her elderly neighbor could not care for a newborn for long, and Rebecca had no idea when she would be released from the hospital. With trembling hands and blurred vision, she reached for her phone and called the one person she believed would help without hesitation: her mother. The call quickly turned into a nightmare. Instead of concern, Rebecca was met with annoyance. Her mother was spending the day at a luxury spa and preparing for a Caribbean cruise scheduled to leave the following morning. As Rebecca fought back tears and explained the severity of the accident, her mother dismissed her fears. She questioned whether the situation was truly serious and accused Rebecca of being overly dramatic, just as she had done countless times throughout her life. Rebecca pleaded with her, explaining that Emma needed someone immediately and that she was frightened, injured, and alone. But her mother's response only grew colder. Rather than rushing to help her daughter and granddaughter, she complained about her expensive spa treatments, her vacation plans, and the inconvenience of driving to Rebecca's home. She insisted that Rebecca should have planned better and suggested hiring a babysitter instead. Every word felt like another blow. Lying injured in the back of an ambulance, Rebecca could hardly believe what she was hearing. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking anyone to cancel a vacation. She was simply begging her mother to care for her 6-week-old granddaughter during a medical emergency. Then came the words Rebecca would never forget. During the conversation, her mother dismissed Emma not as a beloved granddaughter, but as a consequence of Rebecca's own choices. According to her, Rebecca had chosen to become a mother and therefore needed to deal with the consequences herself. The statement hit harder than the collision that had shattered her ribs. In that moment, Rebecca realized that her mother viewed neither her nor Emma as family worth sacrificing for. Without another word of comfort, her mother ended the call and returned to her spa day. The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone screen in disbelief, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. Her body was broken, her future uncertain, and her newborn daughter needed help. Yet the person who should have been there without question had chosen convenience over family. As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, Rebecca finally understood a painful truth when everything fell apart. Her mother's priorities had never included her. As Rebecca lay in her hospital bed, struggling to process both the physical pain of the accident and the emotional devastation of her mother's rejection, help arrived from an unexpected source. Within 40 minutes of her desperate call, Claudia, a professional newborn care specialist, arrived at her home to care for baby Emma. Calm, experienced, and compassionate, Claudia immediately took control of the situation. She coordinated with Rebecca's elderly neighbor, gathered information about Emma's feeding schedule, and reassured everyone involved that the baby would be safe. What struck Rebecca most was not Claudia's professionalism but her kindness. Here was a complete stranger, someone with no personal obligation to her family, stepping in without hesitation while her own mother had chosen a spa appointment over her granddaughter's well-being. Claudia never questioned Rebecca's decisions, never criticized her, and never made her feel like a burden. She simply helped. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A few hours later, Rebecca's phone rang again. This time it was her husband, Marcus. He had just landed from a business trip in Dallas and immediately learned what had happened. Unlike her mother, Marcus didn't question whether the accident was serious. He didn't ask how inconvenient the situation might be for him. The moment he heard that his wife was injured and his newborn daughter needed support, he canceled everything. A major presentation that he had spent months preparing for no longer mattered. Within minutes, he was booking the earliest flight home. Hearing his voice crack with concern brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. His reaction reminded her of something she had almost forgotten: real family shows up when you need them most. As the night grew quieter and the hospital room dimmed, Rebecca found herself replaying old memories she had spent years trying to ignore. The accident had not created the pain she felt toward her mother. It had simply exposed it. For the first time, she began looking honestly at a pattern that stretched back more than 2 decades. Throughout her childhood, her younger sister Vanessa had always seemed to live under a different set of rules. When Vanessa earned good grades, she was praised as brilliant and talented. When Rebecca achieved the same results, her mother expected more. When Vanessa made mistakes, they were excused as learning experiences. When Rebecca stumbled, she was criticized for being careless or irresponsible. The memories came flooding back one after another. School awards that barely received acknowledgement. Sports achievements that were overlooked. Career successes that were met with indifference. Meanwhile, Vanessa was celebrated for accomplishments that often seemed far less significant. Rebecca remembered sitting at family dinners, listening as her mother proudly shared stories about Vanessa's latest achievement while barely mentioning her own. She remembered holidays where Vanessa received expensive gifts while Rebecca was told to be grateful for whatever she got. She remembered countless conversations that ended the same way, with Rebecca apologizing for things that were never entirely her fault. For years, she had convinced herself that she was imagining the favoritism. She told herself that every family had imperfections. She believed that if she worked harder, gave more, and asked for less, eventually she would earn the same love and approval that seemed to come so naturally to her sister. But lying in that hospital bed, bruised and broken after a life-threatening accident, the truth became impossible to deny. This was not about one phone call. It was not about one bad day or one unfortunate decision. This was the result of 20 years of unequal treatment, 20 years of being expected to sacrifice while others received support, 20 years of chasing validation that never came. The realization was painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time, Rebecca stopped asking why her mother had refused to help. The answer had been there all along. Her mother's response in the ambulance wasn't an exception to the rule, it was the clearest example of it. The accident had simply stripped away every excuse and every illusion. When Rebecca needed her most, her mother revealed exactly where she stood. And for the first time in her life, Rebecca was ready to believe her. Late that night, after the doctors had finished their examinations and the hospital hallway had finally grown quiet, Rebecca found herself unable to sleep. The pain medication dulled the ache in her broken ribs and fractured collarbone, but it couldn't numb the realization that had been growing inside her ever since her mother hung up the phone. For years, she had excused the criticism, ignored the favoritism, and convinced herself that one day things would change. But lying alone in a hospital bed after a near-fatal accident, she could no longer avoid the truth. Her mother had made a choice, and that choice had revealed exactly how much Rebecca truly mattered to her. Almost without thinking, she reached for her phone and opened her banking application. What she was about to do had crossed her mind many times over the years, but she had never found the courage to follow through. The familiar account appeared on the screen, along with a recurring transfer scheduled to be processed in just a few days. The amount was simple enough, $4.500 every month, but the history behind it told a much larger story. Rebecca stared at the transaction details and felt a wave of memories wash over her. She had created that automatic payment when she was only 19 years old. Back then, her parents had been struggling financially. Her father's work hours had been reduced, bills were piling up, and there had been constant conversations about the possibility of losing their home. Rebecca had just started her first full-time job after college, and despite earning far less than she does today, she couldn't bear the thought of her parents suffering. Without telling anyone, she opened a separate account and arranged for money to be transferred every month to cover their mortgage and other expenses. She never asked for recognition. She never expected repayment. She simply wanted to help the people she loved. What started as a temporary solution slowly became a permanent part of her life. Month after month, year after year, the payments continued. Whenever she received a promotion, she increased the amount. Whenever her parents talked about taking vacations, buying a new car, or helping Vanessa financially, she quietly smiled, knowing she was the reason they could afford those things. They never knew where the extra money came from, and they never questioned it. They simply accepted the comfort it provided. For the first time, Rebecca calculated the total. $4,500 every month. 108 consecutive months. The number that appeared on her calculator made her stomach tighten. $486,000. Nearly $500,000. Rebecca stared at the figure in disbelief. $500,000. Money that could have paid off her own mortgage. Money that could have built a college fund for Emma. Money that could have provided security for her own family. Instead, she had spent almost a decade using it to support parents who couldn't spare 3 hours for their granddaughter during a medical emergency. The realization cut deeper than any physical injury. It wasn't the money itself that hurt. It was what the money represented. For years, she had convinced herself that she was helping out of love. But now she understood something much more painful. Somewhere along the way, she had begun using generosity as a way to earn affection that should have been freely given. Every transfer had been an unspoken attempt to prove her worth. Every sacrifice had been a quiet hope that one day her parents would see her, appreciate her, and love her the way she longed to be loved. But no amount of money had ever changed anything. The more she gave, the more they expected. The more she sacrificed, the less she seemed to matter. And when she needed them most, when she was frightened, injured, and desperate for help, all those years of support had counted for nothing. A strange sense of calm settled over her. For the first time in years, Rebecca wasn't thinking about what her parents needed. She was thinking about what Emma deserved. Her daughter deserved security. Her daughter deserved opportunities. Most importantly, her daughter deserved a mother who would choose her first. Rebecca navigated to the recurring payment settings. Her finger hovered over the screen for a moment. 9 years of habit. 9 years of obligation. 9 years of trying to earn something that should never have required payment. Then she pressed the button. Cancel automatic transfer. A confirmation message appeared. She selected yes. Just like that, it was over. The monthly payment that had defined nearly a decade of her life disappeared from the screen. But Rebecca wasn't finished. She opened a new savings account and entered a name that instantly brought tears to her eyes. Emma's future. The same amount that had once gone to her parents would now belong to her daughter. $4,500 every month. The money would grow alongside Emma, creating opportunities, security, and freedom that no one could ever take away from her. As she completed the setup, something shifted inside her. For the first time since the accident, she felt lighter. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because she had finally stopped carrying a burden that was never hers to bear. The woman who had spent years sacrificing herself for people who never truly appreciated her was beginning to disappear. In her place stood someone stronger. A mother determined to break the cycle and build a better future. When the final confirmation appeared on the screen, Rebecca smiled through her tears. Nearly $500,000 had taught her a lesson she would never forget. Love cannot be bought. Respect cannot be purchased. And no amount of sacrifice will ever be enough for people who only value what you can give them. But from this moment forward, every dollar she earned, every sacrifice she made, and every dream she built would be for someone who truly deserved it. Emma. Just when Rebecca thought she had been completely abandoned by her family, someone unexpected walked through the hospital room door. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening when she looked up and saw a tall, elderly man standing quietly in the doorway. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture still proud despite his age, and his piercing blue eyes carried both wisdom and concern. It was her grandfather, Joe. The same man who had taught her how to fish when she was a child, who never forgot a birthday, and who always seemed to know when she was hurting, even when she tried to hide it. The moment he saw her lying in the hospital bed, bruised and exhausted, his expression changed. There was sadness in his eyes, but there was also something else, anger. Without saying a word, he walked to her bedside and gently took her hand. Unlike everyone else, he didn't ask whether she was okay. He could see the answer for himself. Instead, he asked a different question. Tell me exactly what happened. Rebecca hesitated at first, but then the entire story poured out. The accident. The ambulance ride. Emma being left with an elderly neighbor. The desperate phone call to her mother. The rejection. The hurtful words she could not stop replaying in her mind. Her grandfather listened silently. When she finally finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. Do you know who paid for that cruise? He asked. Rebecca shook her head. I did. The answer stunned her. He explained that he and her late grandmother had purchased the luxury Caribbean cruise as an anniversary gift for her parents. They had wanted to do something special for them. Instead, that gift had become an excuse for her mother to abandon her daughter and granddaughter during a medical emergency. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Grandpa Joe pulled out his phone. I'm calling her. Rebecca immediately recognized the determination in his voice. The phone rang only once before her mother answered. "Dad, if this is about the cruise again." "It is not about the cruise," he interrupted coldly. There was a long silence. Then he continued. "I just spoke with Rebecca." His daughter immediately became defensive. "Dad, she's exaggerating. You know how dramatic she can be." Those words were enough to make his jaw tighten. "Dramatic," he repeated. "Your daughter was pulled out of a wrecked car. She has broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a concussion." "She's alive, isn't she?" her mother replied. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Then Grandpa Joe asked the question that would haunt the family forever. "Did you really call your own granddaughter a consequence?" Silence. Rebecca could hear faint breathing through the speaker. Finally, her mother spoke. "Well, Rebecca chose to have a baby. Emma is the result of her choices." "No," Grandpa Joe said firmly. "Emma is your granddaughter." Another silence followed. Then came the words Rebecca had waited her entire life to hear from someone. "I'm ashamed of you." The sentence landed like a thunderclap. For the first time, someone was holding her mother accountable. For the first time, someone was refusing to excuse her behavior. But the confrontation was only beginning. After ending the call, Grandpa Joe turned back to Rebecca. "What else haven't you told me?" Rebecca looked down at her hands. Then she told him about the money. At first, he didn't understand. "What money?" "The mortgage payments." "What mortgage payments?" "The ones I've been making for 9 years. His eyebrows furrowed. Slowly, Rebecca explained everything. How she had started sending money when she was 19. How she had continued every month without fail. How the payments covered the mortgage, the car, and many of the luxuries her parents enjoyed. Grandpa Joe sat completely still. "How much?" Rebecca swallowed. $4,500 every month. He stared at her. "For 9 years." She nodded. His face turned pale. "Rebecca, that's nearly $500,000. $486,000. The room fell silent. For several moments, Grandpa Joe simply stared at the floor. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of disappointment. Not in Rebecca. In his own daughter. "They accepted all that money?" he asked quietly. "They never even questioned where it came from." A muscle twitched in his jaw. Then, without warning, he stood up and began pacing the room. "They lived comfortably because of you." "Yes." "They took vacations because of you." "Yes." "They helped Vanessa buy a house because of you." Rebecca nodded. His anger became impossible to hide. "And when you were lying in an ambulance begging for help with your newborn daughter, they couldn't give you 3 hours." Rebecca said nothing. She didn't need to. The answer was obvious. Grandpa Joe grabbed his phone again. This time his voice was colder than Rebecca had ever heard. When her mother answered, he didn't waste a second. "You have 24 hours. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "You have 24 hours to apologize to Rebecca." "Dad, this is ridiculous." "No. What's ridiculous is that your daughter spent 9 years supporting you financially while you treated her like an inconvenience." His daughter tried to interrupt. He didn't let her. "You refused to help her after a life-threatening accident." "Dad, you called your granddaughter a consequence." "Dad, and now you're going to listen." For the first time in years, his daughter became completely silent. Then came the ultimatum. "If you do not apologize to Rebecca within 24 hours, I will change my will." The silence that followed seemed endless. "What?" "You heard me." "Dad, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." He took a breath before continuing. "The house." Silence. "The stocks." More silence. "The savings accounts." "Nothing. Everything I plan to leave you will go to Rebecca and Emma." His daughter sounded panicked now. "Dad, you're overreacting." "No," he replied. "I've been underreacting for years." Then he delivered the final blow. "Your mother would be ashamed of the woman you've become." And with that, he ended the call. The room was silent. Rebecca sat frozen. For the first time since the accident, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Justice. Not revenge. Not anger. Justice. Someone had finally seen the truth. Someone had finally stood beside her. And for the first time in her life, Rebecca realized she was no longer fighting this battle alone. The real consequences of Rebecca's decision did not appear overnight. For a few weeks, there was silence. Then, exactly as she had expected, the phone calls began. The first call came from her mother. Rebecca almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of her. The moment she picked up, she could hear panic in her mother's voice. "Rebecca, there's been some mistake with the mortgage payment," her mother said. "The bank says it wasn't received. Can you help us figure out what happened?" Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment. For nearly a decade, she had imagined what this conversation might sound like. Yet now that it was happening, she felt surprisingly calm. "There wasn't a mistake," she replied quietly. "What do you mean?" "I canceled the payments." A long silence followed. Then came disbelief. "What payments?" Rebecca took a slow breath. "The payments I've been making every month for the last 9 years." The line went completely silent. For the first time, her mother finally understood the truth. The comfortable life she had enjoyed for nearly a decade had not been funded by luck, extra pension income, or clever financial planning. It had been funded by the daughter she constantly criticized and dismissed. "That was you," her mother whispered. "Every month." Her mother's voice trembled. But why would you stop?" "We could lose the house." Rebecca almost laughed at the irony. "When I was trapped in an ambulance after a major accident, terrified for my daughter and begging for help, you chose a spa appointment and a cruise. Now you're asking me why I stopped helping." The panic in her mother's voice grew stronger. "We're your parents, Rebecca. Family doesn't abandon family." The words hit differently now. For years, those words would have filled her with guilt. "Not anymore." "You abandoned me first," Rebecca replied. "You abandoned your granddaughter. You made your choice that day. Now I'm making mine." The conversation ended exactly where it needed to end, with the word no. For the first time in her life, Rebecca refused to negotiate, explain, or apologize. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. Her father called repeatedly. Her mother left emotional voicemails. Her sister Vanessa accused her of destroying the family. Even distant relatives began reaching out, insisting she was being selfish, vindictive, and ungrateful. Not one of them asked how her recovery was going. Not one asked about Emma. Not one seemed concerned about the fact that she had nearly died. Their only concern was the money. That realization made her final decision easy. One by one, she blocked every number. The silence that followed felt strange at first. Then it felt peaceful. 3 months later, Rebecca learned through mutual friends that her parents had been forced to make significant lifestyle changes. The luxury car was gone. The large house had been sold. They moved into a much smaller condominium and began living within their actual means for the first time in years. Her mother, who had spent so much time enjoying spa days and vacations, returned to full-time bookkeeping work. Her father picked up consulting jobs to supplement his income. Surprisingly, Rebecca felt no satisfaction in their struggles. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply felt free. For the first time in years, her money was being used to build her own family's future, instead of financing someone else's lifestyle. As months turned into a year, life slowly improved. Emma grew stronger, healthier, and happier every day. Marcus received a promotion at work. The savings account labeled Emma's Future continued to grow month after month. Then, almost exactly 1 year after the accident, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly recognizable. Vanessa. Rebecca stared at it for several minutes before finally opening it. Inside was a heartfelt apology. Her sister explained that after Rebecca stopped providing financial support, their mother had turned to her instead. What started as occasional requests for help had evolved into constant demands for money. Vanessa found herself paying bills, covering expenses, and sacrificing her own financial security. For the first time in her life, she was experiencing what Rebecca had endured for years. The letter was filled with honesty. She admitted that she had never truly understood the favoritism. She admitted that she had dismissed Rebecca's pain. Most importantly, she admitted that Rebecca had been right all along. Their mother didn't love people for who they were. She valued people for what they provided. And the moment they stopped providing it, they became disposable. As Rebecca finished reading, tears formed in her eyes. Not because she felt vindicated, because she felt sad. Sad that it had taken so much pain for her sister to finally see the truth. A few days later, she wrote a short reply. She thanked Vanessa for her honesty. She wished her well. But she also explained that healing takes time. Some wounds cannot be repaired overnight, and some boundaries exist for a reason. 2 years passed. The accident became a memory rather than a daily burden. Emma grew into a bright, energetic little girl with endless curiosity and a contagious laugh. She knew nothing about the grandmother who had called her a consequence. She knew nothing about the years of manipulation, favoritism, or emotional neglect. What she did know was love. She knew parents who chose her every single day. She knew a father who would cross the country for his family without hesitation. She knew a mother who had fought to create a better future for her. And she knew Grandpa Joe. Every Sunday he visited with books, stories, and endless affection. He attended birthdays, school events, and family dinners. He showed up consistently, proving that family is defined by actions, not titles. One afternoon at a local park, another parent casually asked Rebecca whether Emma's grandparents lived nearby. Rebecca smiled as she watched Grandpa Joe push Emma on a swing while the little girl laughed with pure joy. "Oh yes," she replied. The woman glanced toward the elderly man. "That's her grandfather." Rebecca nodded. "The only one she needs." As she watched Emma soar higher into the air, Rebecca realized something important. For years she had believed losing her family would leave an empty space in her life. Instead, removing the toxic relationships had created room for something better: peace, self-respect, freedom, and a family built on genuine love rather than obligation. Sometimes people mistake boundaries for cruelty. They mistake self-respect for selfishness. But Rebecca had learned a different truth. The people who truly love you will never require you to sacrifice your dignity to keep them happy. And if someone only values you for what you can give them, losing them is not a tragedy. It is a gift. 2 years earlier, Rebecca had nearly lost everything in a devastating car accident. Instead, she found something she never expected: her worth. And once she found it, she never gave anyone the power to take it away again.